start, thank you very much. We are live streaming this morning's performance, so be aware that our public is watching us. So your behaviour will be perfect as always. As you'll see, I'm currently mayorless. We've picked the furthest piece of geography we could find to get from Europe to here, so it's obviously a challenge. But I don't want to keep anybody waiting, so we will crack on and bring them over when she arrives. So that's my introduction and welcome to you all. I would just mention that Ian is accompanied by Megan down the bottom end there, who is work experience person. So she's going to experience what our world is firsthand, and she's promised to give me some feedback on my performance and our performance generally. So let's see how we go. The only apology that I've had is from Paul Harris. As far as I'm aware, Natasha's coming, Becky Ricks is coming, but we'll see. Apologies from sorry, yeah, Councillor yeah. Councillor Reese standing in for Nate today. Has anybody got any declarations of interest that they feel they ought to unburden themselves of? Scott?
It's on the papers, Chair, but just for clarity, just around business support.
Of course, thank you very much. Anybody else with any declarations? No? Okay. We are having a meeting at the National Science Centre, which is a place that I've been to. I only live about 9.9 miles away, according to South. Some of you live even closer, and you've already told me that you haven't been here either, which is bad. So, Helen, it's been your place, your gig, but once you could say a few words.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming up with what we last time.
No?
So yeah, this is the home of the Institute of Quarrying, also the home of the Institute of Technology, and some of the about 3 years ago. This is, well, as you can see, a visitor centre, issues quarry over here. You can have a drive tour if you're interested later. Colleagues down here, Joe Storm, I would like to thank the rest of the team, Chief Executive of the Institute of Quarrying, for setting up this meeting. But the reason we're here is the fact that we're actually drawing down some money. We started a funding application with D2M2, no money to EMCCA, to rebuild all of this and create an educational campus, visitor centre, expand the cafe, bring in some local museums, and like I say, put us on that, basically. We are a key player, essential minerals in the UK, and we really need to drive it forward, but we really wanted to anchor it and have enough. So these are plans you can see on the wall, and if anybody's interested, I'll come out to chat to you about it.
What's the scale of the investment?
2 million in terms of the EMCCA fund, and to match that, we're just getting the final details from the industry, so we're probably looking at about 7 million in terms of the actual building. We'll look to make that a living laboratory, enhance research in the area. We've got really strong links in the areas of Derby and others, so we'll be progressing that. So yeah, lots going on, and hopefully circularity in terms of materials going into the building, lots of reuse, and targeting net zero. So what's going on?
Yeah. And it will be interesting to see the change, because somebody made that point to me already, that you see the building, it's not made out of stone, so this will become a stone place.
Yeah, we're looking to showcase the industry basically.
Yeah. And somebody was telling me earlier, and I won't carry this on forever, but somebody was telling me earlier about that vista that you're supposed to see there, with the lagoon and the quarries and the stone. You can't see it because of the trees, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, so the Sunset came into existence about 1984, something like that, and there was about 3 trees on the site. And it was owned by, or run by the National Stone Centre volunteers. They didn't have the capacity to manage a site of 42 acres. So naturally, a lot of the ash trees grew up in that 40 years. It's now classified under the Forestry Commission as a woodland site. So we have to balance between SSI geologically meeting the needs of natural England and also managing it as a site. And I think actually we can balance that, but we will be able to take the trees out. We'll then have to offset the biodiversity gain. We've built that into the new development, that takes some gain. So it's committed to giving the principles that we see as institute as an industry. So, but yeah, it does, at the moment it does hamper a little bit, but hopefully we'll be able to resolve that through the management plan we put together.
We've got one major applicant in Sean who's already been raving about the place. And,
It's a fabulous place.
yeah.
You can go and do a car run, test it.
I think it's important that for the business board that we don't just sit in one place, that we go and visit businesses and visit other places around the patch. We're probably a bit Derbyshire-centric to now, but there's a plan going forward as to where we keep moving around. So Helen, thank you guys for hosting us. Appreciate it. It wasn't a couple of days ago. This would probably have been a sauna. I'm not equally glad it wasn't in December because it would have been Malcolm would have had an idea for it. Okay, right, back to the agenda then. So, minutes of the previous meeting. This, as you appreciate, is a formal meeting. We have 4 formal meetings a year, which we are mandated to do by the government of EMCCA. At these meetings, we can take such decisions as we need or make such recommendations as we formally need to make. Other meetings, like the ones where we've used to discuss the local growth plan, are informal and don't need a safe degree of government support. So this is a formal one, because we've got 1 or 2 things that we have to agree today. One of the things we have to do is agree the minutes of the previous meeting, which, if you recall as far back as 22nd of January, which you probably don't, and you have them before you, are you happy with those minutes as an accurate record of that meeting? So you want to nod, so I will take that as a consensus. Does anybody have anything that they feel is a matter which is arising from those minutes which ought to be reflected upon here? I have one myself. The answer to that is no. Then mine is the local growth plan, which is my favourite topic. I'm not sure EMCCA officers will appreciate the level of interest in this subject, but I feel that our local growth plan is not yet where it should be, by any means. That view is shared by the EMCCA officers, and they are working quite hard on getting it where it should be. At the moment, candidly, it is too anodyne, it looks too like in other places, and it's very much lacking in deliverables and specific objectives which tell us how we're going to get to the promised land of 2040 in a better place than the one. It needs a lot of work, and everyone is conscious of that. So we're not going to dwell on it today, but we will be back to it at another informal session quite soon, because it is important. And if it doesn't look right, we won't get the investment that we're looking for. And there are circulating in the political dimension things like integrated settlements, and we need to look like a really focused body that has a clear set of objectives. And one of the places those have been written down is a local growth plan. So it's not just an artifice. I accept that the plan is a strategy, and like most strategies, it will be left in a drawer until such time as it's needed to be brought out to show something. But off the back of that strategy, there need to be clear and specific deliverables that we're focused on working on. And some of those we can identify today, some of those things that are happening in our world, like the Freeport, we can actually be vocal about the fact we are supporting them today. So I don't see any reason why we're being as reserved as we currently are. That's my chairman's rant, and I know that most of you probably get everything I'm saying, so I should help it there unless anyone else has any more thoughts on that particular subject.
Chair, for my benefit, is there any particular project that sticks out as perhaps draggy? Everything I've heard since my involvement with EMCCA is extremely positive about sport and Derbyshire. Is there any particular thorn, perhaps?
No, I think the challenge is that the really healthy thing that's happening is for the very first time we're thinking about the East Midlands as an entity. And for the very first time it has an identity. I'm trying to pull together, I accept the political challenge of trying to pull together all of the interests that exist across that entity and support them in a way that is on the one hand, even and inclusive, on the other hand, is most effective, is quite a challenge. And the challenge is, I think, to actually grasp that and ought just to agree, Frank, to agree that there will be winners and losers, that we can't support everything, and we've got to be focused on what we support for the greatest benefit for the area. And I think the challenge is we've got to sort of break through that wall into deciding what those things are. And that's the place we've not got to. If that helps with your question.
So I'd like to speak to you further on that subject at some point.
Anybody else? Still silence, no, okay. John?
I suppose, just thinking about what you said, we agree, concur with the position on the growth plan. It's more how the inclusive growth plan fits into the local growth plan as well. I'd like to understand more about how that's going to work as it comes together. At the moment, the inclusive growth plan seems more distant from what's been presented to this board.
I mean, there is potentially a tension between the two. You've got to have growth. For me, you've got to have growth before you can include people in that growth. So growth comes first. I totally understand and agree with the mayor's view that growth should be inclusive. And the two things are in parallel, but energy officers are very conscious that the two need to work together. I don't know what Jesse, you sort of got the pen on some of this?
Yes, I have. I mean, I think it's right, Dave. Potentially, there might be a tension. The sequencing of tasks, I guess, means that the RSA report, which is an independent report, will be published before we publish our EMCCA local growth plan. So, in my view, that gives us time to consider those recommendations and see where we feel, including taking advice from this board, about how we want to take that forward in our local growth plan. But I think it's really important that we ensure in that sequencing we can come back to the board, which I think will probably be through an informal meeting.
Probably mid-July.
Yes, to look at that. But we're expecting, Jamie, am I right, the Inclusive Growth Commission's report in July, with their report?
The Inclusive Growth Commission, the final report will be delivered in September, and they're working through kind of they're working towards that final drafting. We'll be, alongside the RSA, we'll obviously be working to make sure that we're aware of how the final recommendations are shaping up so that we can, as best as possible, reflect on those as the work is developing, as opposed to just a kind of a set-piece moment and then a quick turnaround. So there's going to be some kind of parallel work on that front, but whilst they're working at arm's length in that sense, just so that we're informed of where the Commission's heading as we're developing not only the local growth plan at EMCCA, but other strategies that will necessarily need to reflect the recommendations.
Okay. Ian.
Could I just add a comment there? So, in support of making some real choices in a local growth plan, so just a reflection that I and colleagues have been working with central government to say exactly the same message for the UK's industrial strategy, that it needs to make some specific choices. Any strategy worth its salt must have winners and losers. I think we're starting to see that at the national level. I think we would have preferred a bit more of the specificities, but we're starting to see that, and therefore it's really important that it's also reflected at a local level. And I would just say also the Royal Society of Arts reached out bilaterally to Rolls-Royce, and we hosted them a few weeks back and gave the same sort of messages that local growth plan should have some decisions and coherent set of choices based around priorities for the region. So, one message ahead.
Good. Just another maybe sidebar before let's go into the agenda proper. I mentioned the integrated settlements. We appreciate what I mean by integrated settlements. So to give us a long-term funding view. re-established authorities have integrated settlements, so in Powerhouse, St Mills, London. Our ambition, which you heard from the Mayor, is to achieve an integrated settlement for EMCCA as soon as possible. I was on a call with Alex Morris, I always forget his title, but he's basically local growth minister, on Monday, and I was lobbying for EMCCA to have its integrated settlement as soon as possible. He said that lobbying was welcome. He did say that Claire was on the phone to him literally every day seeking the same thing, but further lobbying was always welcome. What he stressed was hearing it from business was crucial for government, so any of you that are in a position to lobby national politicians about EMCCA having an integrated settlement sooner rather than later would be good. All that he would undertake was the expectation is we would have one by the end of this parliament, but that's too long. We want one now at last, because we can go further and faster with an integrated settlement. So, where there is opportunity, please lobby. He said it could be welcomed. One time. I was saying that we deliberately found the furthest place from your homes.
I think you did.
Yeah.
It's taken me about 2 hours. Anyway, well, we'll grab a coffee if that's all right.
Okay, so item number 5 on our agenda is appointments to committees. We have confirmed to the committee appointments that we have recommended to EMCCA. A number of you very kindly put your names forward to go on other committees. There were such a number that not all were successful. So we were in that interesting position of saying yes to some people and no to others. So those that didn't get appointed, sort of apologies or commiserations or whatever. Those that have been appointed, thank you very much for putting names forward and thank you for the efforts that you've been making. For those who didn't get appointed this time, there will be plenty of other opportunities to do better work on behalf of EMCCA, so be not afraid. But we have to, as a board, formally confirm those 3 appointments. So if you just bear with me, appointments into 3 bodies, and our recommendation is that we appoint Maura Senior as our representative to the Investment Committee, Sean Lone as our representative to the Transport and Digital Connectivity Committee, and Malcolm Hall as our representative to the Skills and Employment Committee. Are we all happy with those 3 recommendations? Yes, thank you very much. So we're on hereby subsumed another committee.
Chair, can I just say as well, what I'll be doing out of the back of this meeting is then contacting those nominations and appointments to, figure out. So we have it within our gift basically to shape those roles as we want to, and to understand the sort of dynamics that will most effectively serve this board, others, and also support the individuals that are giving up their time. So we fully recognise the extra commitment being made there, and I'll be making sure that we make sure that collectively works very well for everyone.
Okay, thank you all. So on to next item 6, which is our annual report. We are required by the government of EMCCA to the main board and annual report on our activities. I would like to claim that this report is all my own work, but it's not. It's largely Jamie's.
You're more than welcome to claim.
But I think it's an excellent report. So it's there for noting really, there for you to recommend to the main board. I'm assuming you've had a chance to read it. Has anyone got any comments? Any items there which changed or corrected or improved? Please say. people are rapidly speed reading. If there are no comments,
All I'm saying, Chair, is I thought it was good to see the summary written down. Because the meetings are, you know,
I just said I quite felt better with it summarised.
yeah.
Because you know, you forget we've done 5 meetings, we forget we have been doing stuff. So it feels better. I didn't think Joe would have any difficulty finding this place. Okay, everybody happy with the report? Seems so, yes? Okay, report forward to the main board, thank you very much.
And just to say on this matter as well, what I'll be looking to do with David is to create a clear forward plan as well for the next year as we continue to sort of establish the foundations of its activities.
We're rattling through this agenda disturbingly quickly. So can I move us on to what is the substantive item of discussion today, which is the future of the economic development functions across the region. I think it's time to get the place wide, because maybe we should just say a few words about this. We feel pretty strongly about how we develop economic development functions, and then we'll have a person to talk us through.
Yes, she says trying to get ahead together. This is the problem with 1,001 things going on in a morning before you can get started on a meeting. So we've obviously talked about the importance of the inclusive growth commission and what it will deliver, and the levers that we have on economic development are, well, you will see a whole range of different things that we can do, but how we deploy those across the partnership with the business communities is absolutely essential for us. So I'm particularly keen to get views of the Business Advisory Board and indeed beyond the membership of this board, because I think we have still got a very big job to do in selling to the rest of the region, and particularly to key partners the opportunities that come from the functions that we have to drive economic development, whether that be through the investments that we are making, whether it be our particular relationships with the Freeport investment zone, through the investments in things like transport and infrastructure, but also the work we're doing around the skills and the relationships with people. So I'm going to Jason perhaps I can take on further moves in the discussion.
Yeah.
Good. Well, hello everyone, and just to introduce myself, I think I met some of you at the informal meeting, but not all of you. So my name is Jessie Buscombe, next there, and I'm currently the Interim Director of Economic Growth and Innovation at EMCCA. And I'm with EMCCA until October, when a permanent replacement will hopefully be joining to lead this very important work. And I just wanted to say, by way of introduction, this work I think is very important in terms of the functions that I'll be leading over the summer. I'd probably go to say is it's the most important, because without business growth, we don't have sufficient growth, right? We won't grow this region purely by public investment, as we all know. We will grow it by businesses expanding, we'll grow it by new foreign direct investors coming into the region, we'll grow it by our existing domestic business base growing, that's both our SMEs, our tourism industry, and these will be the real, I think, kind of pillars of growing the region in a way that then provides the inclusive growth that Claire was talking about. And I would say that just by way of a little bit of extra background, I've worked most of my career in business engagement programmes, predominantly more in central government. So I'm absolutely here to listen to what's appropriate for the region and learn what will work best in the region. And I was just also sharing with David, I had the experience of running my own business, so I know how difficult it can be to operate a very small business in this climate. We talked about this last informal meeting, and Becky, your points really resonate with me. So that's the kind of big picture why. Jamie, are you my slide meister? Thank you so much. And Jamie Jordan joins me in this presentation. Jamie is our head of economic growth strategy and has really been leading the progress of this work within my team. So the overall pitch or opener that I'm here to tell you about today is that we as EMCCA are proposing a holistic and overarching review of all of our functions that we fund that support these three areas: our business support work, our inward investment work, and our visitor economy. And we are proposing to bring in an external consultancy firm to examine how this work is currently situated in the region and how that's working and how it could work in the future. And I'm going to talk a bit about the practicalities of that review in this presentation. So I think I've touched on this already in terms of my opening, but I think it's probably important to just add a few more points into the why we would do this review. So as mentioned, we've got the opportunity with EMCCA, which is a relatively new organisation, to take a strategic look on how we increase business growth in the region, and that will really be driven by, as we were discussing earlier, recommendations from the Inclusive Growth Commission, which will then feed into our local growth plan. I think I also recognise that we're in a very fast-changing and I think dynamic business environment at the moment, and I think there's a need to ensure that any system of business support or business attraction takes account of this. So I've put up a few issues I think businesses are grappling with, but I'm sure many of you will tell me more detail on this. But we talked about some of the challenges, the current operating costs of businesses. I also think technological change and AI is moving faster than many of us would have anticipated. And then kind of internally, when we think about the world within EMCCA, we have changes within the structure of the way regions are governed. So within the devolution white paper, we scoped out an increased role for strategic authorities, EMCCA being one of those, to be intervening more in business growth and taking a more interventionist role. And I think that's related to some key changes that are also happening in central government. So very delighted to be joined by colleagues from Department of Business and Trade. There are changes that are happening within central government around their responsibilities for business support, and that also relates to changes around funding and future funding models. And I think we can get into the detail of that, but my sort of take on that is probably central government intervening less in terms of business support and strategic authorities needing to intervene more, and that's both the activity and the funding of activity. So I feel that this is probably telling the Business Advisory Board what you already know, because many of you partners are involved in either delivering the system as is or experiencing and seeking support from the system as is. But basically the existing landscape is one that is quite fragmented. We have used funding from both core funds within EMCCA and also from the UK SPF model to fund a range of business support, visitor economy and inward investment services. And those contracts are all running at the moment until the end of the financial year. So it is quite, for those providers involved, I think quite challenging operating landscape with quite short-term funding. And that is another reason why we are looking to review the system to see where we can provide more longer-term funding commitments.
There is no longer UKSPF and no replacement for UKSPF.
Correct. Thank you, David. That's a very important point.
So can I ask who the examples of who the delivery organisations are, the existing delivery organisations?
So we could give a range of, we could follow up with all the delivery organisations and where the contracts are. Would that be useful?
I think so. Are you looking for a flavour?
No, I think people like Invest Nottingham or
that's essentially.
Yeah,
Marketing
Derby,
Derby.
yeah,
the chambers.
the kind
So
of
a range
organisation.
of business support, so a mixture of kind of business support
Right,
dealing
okay.
with investment and visitor, the ones that are already there essentially.
Yeah.
Maybe a few others, right? But that's the
So
kind
I'm just mindful, that's why I'm asking the question, because obviously those organisations have been around for quite a long time. Some of them have done quite a good job for the region. So it's how it's then the transition of what that happens and change, or may change. So, thank you.
Yeah, and that's certainly Stuart, what we want to come into, Sean, we want to come into discussion how the transition will work. But if it were helpful for the advisory board to have a list of current funding as we go forward. Right, thank you. So in terms of the actual mechanics of the review, so we've been through a process of tendering via open competitive tender for a consultancy firm to come and undertake this activity for us, and we're just in the process of agreeing contracts for that consultancy firm at the moment. But this is the scope of what we would ask them to review. So firstly, to map existing activity. Secondly, crucially, to look at what businesses need and want. So I think I would get at that by saying what users would want, what businesses would want. What our emerging strategies are telling us in terms of priorities. So to Ian's point about kind of where we intervene and where we place our support, bearing in mind we inevitably as a public body cannot support all programmes or all business activity. A review of where central government is in terms of both their funding and their future programme support. So that takes in account things like the Office investment, how they support investment, growth hub activity, and then what is actually distinctive about this region, what actually makes up the distinctive nature of businesses in this region, what the profile is, SMEs, large sectors, what support the tourism sector needs. And then following both that review of the land as it is and where we need to get to, the idea of this review is it will make recommendations for a future operating model, and crucially to the point about how we transition from where we are with the current contracts and current organisations, will make recommendations about how we transition to future funding and future operating. And throughout that, Sarah, absolutely crucial that we get stakeholder engagement. So this begins that process in terms of seeking reviews, but I'm absolutely clear it's just the beginning. And one of the key questions I want to come into when we seek reviews is how we best engage with the board, both through any board meetings, but also one-to-one in terms of making sure that the consultants working on this review have contacted and engaged with you individually.
Can I raise this point? The that's constantly in the room of conflicts of interest.
Mm.
The reason you're all around this table is because you are all interested in the region in some shape or form. You're all in some sense, shape or form, delivering for the region. Therefore, you understand how the region works and you understand what the region needs. So everybody in this room, almost by definition, will have a conflict of interest because you're involved in all of this work. So whether you're delivering or whether you are procuring or whether you are benefiting from any of these programs, I think the input of everybody is vital. And we will be grown up enough in the procurement process, which we eventually get to make sure that we procure properly. But everyone's views are critical, I think, at this point as to how we operate going forward.
That's a question.
So, sorry, Sean first.
No, just building on that, David, because some of us are partners and bondholders. So we've invested time and money into some of those organisations as well. Because again, we see value in helping it, with exposure to the region. So I don't necessarily see it as a showstopper or conflict of interest, but it's just certainly to be noted that there's an interest there from some of the organisations that feel around.
I think if there were no interest, it would be concerned. The very fact that we are all interested is a good thing.
I think it's really timely and needed. What my concern would be is how are you going to consult with communities, especially the most marginalised people that are not accessing support currently, but want to and need to grow or start.
It's a really important point, Patricia. And I would want to take your advice on how we best do that. So either with the scope of this meeting or the conversation to follow.
Is there also a possibility that we can look at other combatant authorities, how they've done it? Because there's been some good work done in other areas that I think we could draw on.
That's such a fantastic point. And thank you, because it's actually was what I had in my notes like this. So you've done me a great service there. So I think when we commission the review in terms of looking at potential scope in the future, I think it's really crucial that we do look at best practice from other regions and perhaps also what's been more challenging and what's not worked so well. So that's definitely something we would steer the consultancy work towards. Thank you.
Can I just flag a little bit of concern that we're going into yet another review, and at the end of that review we'll have a set of actions and recommendations that then we have to consult on and implement. So that's going to then stretch out our timeline. So my concern is that we need to actually do some of this stuff now, and I know that we've got the 2 million in various different pockets in a holding pattern, but could I make a plea that we actually look at some of the short-term things that can make that we are seeing action on the ground before we wait for a longer-term review. And I get that you want the longer-term review so that you can see where you put big funding areas. But I just feel that we are yet again going to be constraining ourselves by non-action, waiting on the great thing of the report, where I would say that we must, between us, already have 3 actions in each of those buckets when business development, investment and visitor economy that we could be getting on with that will give us some good KPI returns. And I think that success is very, that's very nebulous there. We need to be much more focused on what are they going to deliver and how are we going to deliver it starting now.
Good.
I would completely agree with what you said, and that came at the last informal board in terms of let's get on with some of this. I think the other point to note is as well, as an organisation that represents the visitor economy, we're hitting a critical timeline of funding over the summer, so we can't plan ahead unless we know what's happening. So we can't turn around either. In terms of our funding model, we're taking membership, for example, we've got a rolling membership, but at the moment we're going to transition funding until April, until March 2026. From April, there's nothing in that pipeline funding at the moment. So I could take a membership money from our businesses to say we're going to support you for the next year, actually. Maybe dodgy, illegal scenario as we head into the late, early autumn. And I think that needs to be factored in in terms of we've got to get on with this.
I support that as well. I mean, at the minute, my business, only a small business, family business. And at the minute, I'm all over AI. I'm educating myself on AI, how best to implement it, and obviously looking what educational skills funding streams are out there, and any grants there are. I've mentioned it previously at board meetings, when we actually do put funding out there, don't base it on the old model of employing people. The funding available to me in Mansfield District Council, the first thing, you've got to show you're taking people on. My business is not based on people. I mean, you use technology or you use external factors. If I want an IT person, I'd use an external company. I won't take someone on. So you've got to look at, and I don't know if it's because it's been put through Mansfield District Council, but I think it's done it the same way. So I think we need to take on board. Don't do things that we've always done for the sake of doing it. I know we're trying to get things right, but people need money now. I mean, AI is developing so its knowledge is doubled in 6 months, and it's going to continue to double. And if businesses, what is good with AI is the fact that businesses are not going through consultants who are trying to make money out of business. Businesses can get hold of it and use it themselves. And I think it's key that I totally agree with what everyone said. We need something now to work alongside the long-term project.
So I think one of the really positive things here is recognising the fragmentation and actually introducing something where there's a consistent specification, because that manifests itself in interesting ways. I mean, I had a business from one Derbyshire borough district last week complaining about their competitor in the neighbouring borough district, who was able to get quite a substantive grant for a new CNC machine, and they went to their local authority, and the answer was, who says no? So their argument was, and I think put some merit in saying, well, actually, that's kind of state-sponsored competition, isn't it? That's, they're getting an artificial leg up, that you think, yeah, that can't be right. I think the other opportunity is having a specification that's created locally for business support, one that's not determined in the past in Europe about what good looks like, or perhaps a little bit at the moment a more central government definition of what good looks like. And fully subscribe to Malcolm's view that that old measure of success of how many jobs are you creating is probably feels like an antiquated one. And then I think, taking Joe's point, very much in the same boat around pace. So this year was very much to the wire. And this is not me griping or conflicts of interest, whatever we want to put on it. But actually, it's the 2nd of July today. Actually, still some of the contracts we're delivering. I haven't got a contract yet, which started on the 1st of April. So there is a need for planning and transition and so forth, because there's a whole ecosystem, whether it's the chamber, visit Martin Derby, visit Peak, universities. There's a whole business support ecosystem there. And if we're going to redesign it, it's going to take time.
I've got 3 hands at the moment here, Councillor Rainey. Yeah, go please.
Thank you, Chair. So just wanted to lend a word of support to what Malcolm was saying. I think, unfortunately, it's not just Mansfield that behaves that way. I think the Treasury Green Book analysis bakes in that kind of approach for valuing jobs added, but in a world where productivity is ever more important, I think it is antiquated. But we're not the only people to be making that point. So I think there is support for getting Treasury to change its way of thinking, but it won't be easy. And the second thing I just wanted to add was, I guess, underlining the importance, you had it on the previous slide, about playing to the distinctive strengths of the region, that I think that there's always going to be a temptation to, if you've got business support, you can broadly either use that to build on strengths or fix weaknesses, and the fixing weaknesses it's hard to ignore when those things arise. That's a really tempting thing to do, but actually I think that's a false lens. It's whether it's weak or strong right now, is this something that can be a sustainable strength for the region because it's something that we have a particular distinctive strength in that's unique to this area for whatever reason. If we don't get that bit right and put a lot of effort into really understanding what our strengths are, then I think we will be tempted to just fix weaknesses as they emerge, which is tactical.
Just comment really. I obviously also represent EMCCA, interested to hear about this outside consultant and bring it in. A few comments that we mentioned is stakeholder engagement and feedback from businesses, and that the growth will come from businesses. So it's vital we get those ideas from businesses. So if we're going to appoint an outside consultant, then I think it's important that we act as a conduit, feedback up the chain, ideas from businesses to government, almost to act as a lobbying body as a way, because some of the things that affect businesses are tax and legislation, energy prices, things that we on the ground can't fix. So we must act as a conduit for businesses so their voices are heard, and I believe that must be built into whatever report that's brought forward. We must pass these people's voices on. So I would like that built into whatever report or review that we're doing.
A bit of a meander of thoughts, that's all right. So a bit on programming, a bit on strategy really. I think my initial reaction to the programme was, oh, that looks a bit tight to get everything reorganised and into a perfect model. But I appreciate that there's almost a funding cliff really from end of March next year, so I appreciate that, which is a hard deadline there. My concern, I suppose, is that there are some good teams around that are promoting places or site or sector specific. We need to make sure that we're not sort of throwing the baby out of the bathwater, quite frankly, and then we'll take those teams with us because they're the people that are going to deliver on the ground that actually do the job that we want them to do. So I think that's one thing to note. I think the other thing really is I've seen firsthand with my work through Destination Chesterfield what the impact of only having sort of short funding allocations is. You know, I think strategically, and that's 18 months, and that's not strategic thinking. That's not what we need to support the sort of plans that we'll need to put in place. So I think longer term funding will get us better results at the end of the day. And they're important factors for me. Yeah.
I suspect the point of this exercise to give us a medium and long term answer to something that's been on a fairly short term basis today. But unfortunately, we've got a constrained period in which to start place.
Maybe I think, just to kind of fill in a bit of the context, if you think about the situation that we were in with Marketing Derby or with other partners at the end of last year, which had that cliff edge, what we're trying to do is avoid that position again, because we know that UKSPF is finishing, but we also know that we can't just keep rolling over. We don't have that time, and it's not the best use of money either. So in the same way as we're having these conversations with the Bristol Company through the strategic review about how we spend that money and how we do it with a lens of with the region, rather than just thinking about where money is across different parts of it, whether it be in Marketing Derby or in the Derbyshire Peak District or in Nottinghamshire. We've also got local authorities who are equally doing Destination Chesterfield, Destination Bolsover, without that level of coordination. And that's not the best use of money when you've got now a single front door, or should have a single front door into the region, to make best use of the expertise that sits there, but of a coordinated and more strategic manner. So from that point of view,
I completely understand it's a bit of, can we just get moving on this? And actually the imperative is there because we can't really wait. And there will be things that have to be business as usual going on. But we also have to have a long-term view of how we're going to deploy that money come, whether it be in the business support or in the digital economy going forward. And I think, you know, the last thing I want to do is not get this right. We have one opportunity really. And this has been the biggest challenge of setting up EMCCA, which is everybody wants all of it done now and the money out the door now. But you get a small window, don't you, to make the right decisions, to set frameworks, to determine what you're going to do. And if we get that bit wrong, that platform wrong, we will not be able to catch up and fix ourselves going forward. So I do get the pressure to get money out the door, to get the decisions right. And I think we're doing some of that as well at the same time. If there are things that we can do to bring that forward and sort of, you know, invest in the bits that we know are the questions that we've already got the answers to, everyone's going to agree on. But I do think we have to get this border problem right. Otherwise, you will be coming back to me in 2 years' time and saying, that isn't fixed. That's not the right platform. That's not fixing the problem for those businesses that are getting money over here and not getting money there.
Almost needs to be like a whole different funding up from that. So rather than like giving funding to different people, it's got to be like, if that was my good feeling, that's what I think it needs to be. It needs to be under control for EMCCA and there's accountability. At the minute, there's funding out there, and although there is accountability, who they're accountable to.
Can I also just challenge on on inward investment? You're exactly right, and you know what views on this. You have one portal where people know that they can come and they can get a consistent story, and they can have a consistent package of incentives. And at the moment, you have to go to a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that, depending on where. Now, I'm not sure what my challenge is. What is a review and report going to tell me that's different than the common sense thing that would say you need to bring all these people together, to Malcolm's point, with one consistent narrative and one consistent package. So that, say at the report, I'm bringing in-world investors to have a meeting with the mayor. I'd like to have somebody sitting beside her that can then say, these are what we're going to offer you in either an investment zone, or a report, or an enterprise zone. That's not rocket science, and I'm not quite sure what an inward, an inward investment strand within your work will tell me that's different that I should be doing or waiting 18 months for rather than getting on and doing that now, and then tweaking it as your review comes through.
Yeah.
Would be my challenge.
So I think looking from a business point of view, you need the money, you need it now. And if you get an idea, I mean, businesses, especially small businesses, are very nimble. So you take advantage of opportunities, be it negative or positive. And sometimes things that are negative, be it the worldwide recession in 2009, I saw that as a positive market and start to export. And I did get funding back then to do that. So I do think whilst we've got to go through this process, is it possible to set some sort of a EMCCA up, renamed whatever, marketing EMCCA or whatever, where someone can go in the interim, like Nora just said, then we can still do the process, but then there's money there.
So I wonder if we can look at agreeing some, in a shorter term, agreeing some key principles. So that would allow us still to do a bit more of the review on what sits underneath it.
Yeah.
But we're all at least agreed on what those key principles are. So you're right. I mean, when somebody comes and they're interested, they should have one portal, one opportunity to say, what's that investment opportunity? And we apply that to them. It shouldn't be too difficult for us to agree what those basic principles are up front. And then we can start to fill in a bit more of the detail going forward, which is at least you're allowed to kind of operate in for the short to medium term.
It's the same message, and it's one place ideally where you can find the information from. And that,
Take this away, pretty much.
Yeah.
Would that be?
Happy to, yeah. And I think, to the end with investment piece, and I took the really ignoring that makes sense. I think there's some wiring behind that, so saying foreign direct investment, which, you know, the customer doesn't need to know, but, you know, of you know, various hundreds of FDI companies, some enormous, some micro. Who are we account managing in certain sectors? Are we targeting certain markets? You know, versus, you know, what's being handled by the Office for Investment. So there's some kind of micro wiring, I think, on some of these programs. But I agree that isn't, you know, that doesn't detract from some common sense basic principles.
In terms of the benefits, you know, the Freeport, the investment zones, the enterprise zones, do you have a clear idea of who they're already going for and what sector we want to go for? So it's not that's talking. We don't need to wait for that. We already know what benefits we want to go for and what small innovative companies we want to unlock and get their investment in. So all I'm saying is that, you know, I completely agree with the mayor that, you know, we need to agree some guiding principles to set this thing off, to get some budgets that are already out there brought together so that we have some very clear things that we can move ahead with now, and then refine it as you're doing your longer term work. And I just wouldn't like us to be constrained by waiting with the best will in the world for a piece of report that's going to tell me what we probably already know in a different sense.
the criticise this for the lack of engagement. Natasha, you were trying to get in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, some of it's already been said, but I think as well we need some flexibility as well, because there is things that happen in the world that impact business. We've got what's going on in the Middle East as an issue as well. So I think as well we need some sort of flexibility, because you never know what happens in the world and it impacts on your business.
Yeah, it was just to say, I think, you know, we've got this transition period, but we can't ask certain sectors to sit on pause. And again, I think it's on your point is that those export markets in the district economy sector, for example, it takes 18 months to get into those booking cycles. So if we miss that pocket of time this year, all we're doing is making that 2.5 years until we get into that booking cycle. So there are certain things that still need to be happening right now that can't wait for the review or the next round of funding to determine what we can do to deliver that growth. So I would really welcome some sort of kind of interim set of principles that we could still kind of into taking across some of that growth that we
Partially formed thoughts and questions, so apologies if it doesn't quite string together properly. But I think there's a question about the scope of the review on support that is buried in here somewhere. But I guess in principle there is support that is directly available from EMCCA. There's support from elsewhere, largely central government, which we could influence, and support that, again, largely central government, that we probably can't influence because it's just a national programme that has eligibility criteria that are what they are. So the first one is sort of fairly straightforward, isn't it? Because there is a local growth plan with a strategy, and so the support should be directed accordingly. The second one is not that much harder because, again, the principles of the local growth plan, we should be working out what's in that category and how to influence the deployment of it towards the things that we care about in this region. And then I think the third one, I guess, isn't it, is we just need make it easy for businesses to understand what's there, because I suspect a lot of it is not visible or not well understood. So it's less about, well, kind of by definition, you can't influence it if it's in that category, but we can at least make it accessible to people so that they can help themselves. So as I think there was a question about the scope that started in my head, started that thought process. Are all of those in the scope of what you're intending to review? Is it just the first bit, as it
It's just the first bit.
The first bit.
So what's in scope is what EMCCA funds and provides going forward. I think there's to Councillor Rooney's point, I think there's an important point to build into our scope, which I would take away about the business intelligence that we gather around the business environment factors that influences business regionally, but are not in the control of the strategic.
so that's sort of second category.
Yes, sorry. So,
because I think that's,
gathering, I think we can build that in. I would call that like a business intelligence function, and I think that's a very important thing to have. So how we gather data about trends and issues and how we would then. So I think that's a really important role that strategic authority can play. But I wouldn't see this review as, unless Claire would correct review otherwise, as including a review of central government support.
not reviewing the sense
alone, only in how it then affects any changes in central government programmes affect what we deliver in the region. Is that,
I think it does.
yeah.
I think where it's possible to influence how it's deployed in the region, I think that could be quite an important part of.
Okay.
I'm imagining that that's quite a large sum of support that comes to the region. So
Yeah.
so aligning it to the local growth plan where we possibly can could be quite powerful. If it's just distributed kind of willy-nilly, then it's sort of creating quite a lot of noise in you've got some bits being very strategically targeted, but on a background of a lot of noise of non-targeted support.
Yeah.
Which doesn't in fact sound as strategic as it could be. That's my.
Yeah. And I think it's different in those different buckets, right? So I'm aware in foreign direct investment, the Office for Investment has already reorganised and relaunched with a different strategy, whereas in other areas there is evolving policy and government around. I believe we're about to get a small business strategy later in July. So I think we're in slightly different places in where central government.
Okay, thank you.
But noted. So one thing to take away.
Thank you.
I think there's an element here of, if you're looking at pace and look from guiding principle, there's a number, and thinking about the SME, which is probably where the majority of your growth is going to come from. I think there's only so many ways you can do business support, isn't there? So actually, any scope of consultancy review, we kind of know that it's going to be about how you help people to create a new enterprise. Startups really important. How you help them survive. How you help the micros grow. How you help the SME grow new markets through exporting. How you help businesses with digital transformation. There's some pretty common principles there, isn't there? Any business support program is going to try and address. I do wonder if, and you see central government flip-flops with this sometimes. Trade strategy is a good example. Whatever denomination you apply to export support, over the years it's been, well, we need to get more people who don't export, we need to get them to export. And then the next iteration of it changes and goes, well, actually, we need to get those that already export to export more, presumably because there's more bank people keep doing the latter before. So I think Natasha made a really strong point earlier about communities, and I think those businesses that access business support, and this is a very generalistic comment, and there'll be lots of stats that probably disprove this, but those that access business support clearly try and grow and are more stable and so forth. Those that don't, you know what to do. But those that access business support access programs one after the other, one after the other, because they recognise the value. How to get those businesses that have never taken the business support, for whatever reason, accessibility, visibility, if part of your priority to get businesses that haven't accessed business support, you take it to support. That would be a real positive as well.
Sorry, I've got stuff through. Main part first, and then I'll start. It was just a lot of the discussion we've had really has been around sort of support, funding support, things like that. And we also do site the place marketing piece as well. There's been an awful lot of work done as far as entrance is concerned over the last sort of 12 months or so, which is, I think, is a good narrative starting to come out of that. So I just don't want to lose us to lose sight of the scope to lose sight of that particular piece as well.
It occurs to me that we actually, it's difficult when you engage consultants, know all the answers. We just have to kind of put them in one place and report that one. I'm trying to think about what the remit of the consultant is, because one does spend a lot of time on consultant and is what we already know. We are that far from being there, just the implementation is bit.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that from my own point of view, when I started a business, the support that I needed was completely different to what I needed like 1 year into a business, 4 years into a business, 10 years, 20 years into business where I am now. And I just think you almost need like one central hub, localised, where you're almost, what AI is going to do to a lot of society, especially education. You're not going to go to school, as an example, and then go to college, and then when you finish university, you go to university, the education is going to be finished. It's not. AI is going to be moving that quick. Like the education is going to have to develop, and you have to pop in and out of education and learn new skills as life goes on. And I believe that's going to be the same with business, and it's going to be the same with business support. So we just need to, I think it's always best if you keep things simple. You just need one. To me, if I was starting a business from scratch and designing the ideal what I would need as a business, and I speak to a lot of businesses, small, medium, and large, you'd have one place to go. And if I wanted to speak to someone about looking at international trade markets, someone there I can speak to. If I want an introduction to funding streams, skills and training, I'd speak to the same people in the same department that will help me. Whereas at the minute, I'd have to go to the chamber to look for what the opportunities are for funding. Farm Prince has some see if they've got any funding. Localised government, and like before, what you have to do to get a grant from Mansfield District Council is different to Chesterfield District Council and different to all the other councils. And to be frank, and I'm always frank, it depends what you're dealing with that council. Sometimes you send an email, it takes you a week, and after 3 changes, you get an email back. And that's not a personal experience producing. It's generally what it is. Businesses, private sector work really, really quick. And I think what we're forgetting as well, a lot of businesses have been really, really hit recently. And what I'm trying to do myself personally, one example, is I'm using technology, AI, to move quick and buck the trend, invest in developing, make changes to my website, take advantage. And I'm just a small business. And I think we almost sometimes need to look at it from the business's point of view, rather than from consultation and everything else. And I think the answer is almost there. EMCCA needs its own main hub. It controls, not getting rid of Marketing Derby or anywhere else. They can tap into it, but it's controlled. I think that's what we need. Keep it simple for businesses.
You'd have engaged as consultant.
That's still time.
I'm keeping quiet because we've got a one-to-one after this meeting for feeding, and that's specifically, but I don't disagree with what's been said already. But I think consistency across the region is the right idea. One hub, one region. Why not keep it simple? Sustaining the strengths, I think, is a great idea, but I think sustaining is a good word, because how are we going to sustain business and resilience? The government and the international megatrends that disrupt. So how are we going to make transitions through business, whether that be through a different approach, different business models, AI, things like that. I think we've got to think about how we take the strengths that we've got, but then take them others. Visible funding and accessible. We know, I think, from first-hand experience of trying to do this, we need the skills to write the applications, and we haven't always got it right. So we've been in this process for 6 years. It's been a long journey, so I think having access to something that can be pulled down quickly to respond to business, but actually being able to get to it and just having the skills and knowing who to ask. So I think all of these points we're experiencing first. So I don't want to label the points, I know we have to follow up, but Just to put it in front of the board, really.
I think the point that's emerging is speed,
Mm.
isn't it? I mean, it's I think total players points about getting it right. Challenge of getting it right at speed is something that we need to achieve. No, I think.
It gets speed, but it's also risk appetite. You know, I mean, the business should be able to have a discussion around, wait, is your risk appetite, you know, are we really going to go for it, or are we going to be risk averse and just do a little bit here and there to keep it moving? And I think it would be useful for that discussion to be had at some level, so that then everybody is aware of, you know, are we going to be, is this kind of innovation something that we're really going to go for? So that whatever you give as your strategic priority is going to encourage action, rather than we just get, you know, so we're very cautious.
I'm all that being bold. So I think officers maybe want to look at this and see how we can push, because you know, yes, I do think we need to get this right. But I've got a bigger risk appetite, because bold decisions and bigger results don't they? So
Word of the day.
I think the thing is as well, we don't need to have, if someone wants to ask me a question or yourself a question, just drop us an email, give us a call. We don't have to keep on having meetings. Again, speed.
Yeah. That is part of the plan going forward. John.
I think it's just a side to what we're talking about. But I'm thinking of procurement, social value, community benefit, and how that impacts all the opportunity to benefit SMEs and micro SMEs. Because you know, a lot of the funding is going to come through the vehicles you're talking about, like a shop window, to advertise most of the opportunity and funding. So in the whole procurement strategy and the way that you weave in the social value element, big business. So for example, another put this, about 45% of all the work we do goes to our SMEs. So it's vital that we protect our supply chain and our SMEs that work with us. How do those SMEs get work? How do they get access to the opportunity? Not just with large businesses like us, but also with the entities that make up the EMCCA. So I think maybe there's something that's not just about funding, it's giving opportunity or any kind of line of sight to enable the SMEs to get work in themselves, play a part, direct maybe as well.
Chair, please. Sorry, I'm always the last, because I really like to listen to everything that's going on, and I find it absolutely thrilling, actually, the discussion that takes place at these meetings. I think as a small SME based, as you all know, on the east side of the city, these things all sound brilliant and fantastic, but when you're sitting in your office by yourself and thinking, right, this is what I need to do next, where am I going to go? And that is the big thing. It's the signposting. I think it's having that, and Malcolm's idea is kind of right, I think. I'm not sure it all needs to be centralised, I'm not sure about that, but it's about being able to access it quickly, simply, knowing you'll get an answer, because you can go through the whole process of filling in a grant application, and lots of people have to employ people to do that. I mean, I've spoken to a third party to say, can you complete this for me, because this is quite difficult and I don't know what the answers are. And then you can still be waiting and the opportunity will have passed.
It would be fantastic if you had a grant application where, say,
I don't know, just even electronic would be good.
So you fill one grant application out, and the first 2 or 3 questions were the bloody same as everything else. And all right, I understand you can't just get money for the sake of money, but it does take a long time. I mean, I sit in an office all day on my own, probably 14 hours yesterday, and graph. And we are trying to focus as a business now on the public sector. Never have done in the past, but because a lot of projects are on hold, I am actively targeting the public sector, and it's difficult. And I'm not having to go at Mansfield District Council, but it's who I deal with. You sort of get on their notification of contracts, there's not even not a drop down box, it's a box you can tick, which is for industrial supplies or workwear. And then 4 emails to ask the question, well, what do I tick? Well, people like you should tick merchandise. Well, I'm not a merchandiser. So they're not even getting the basics right in some situations. And that's why I think that formalised, central, not central regulated, but it's right. What you use in one place. So if you do want to have some access to more funding, we've already filled in 4 of the questions already. And all you're tailoring your 5th question is to what the grant is you're applying for, if it is a grant. If it's procurement, it's the same. I mean, we're looking at a tender, I won't mention which one it is, it's no relevance to East Midlands really. But it's probably taking us, must be 200 hours. And most of it is filling questions, and it's like ticking boxes on behalf of the council. You know what I mean? It's not opening the business, it's ticking boxes for the council and taking information about the corporate social responsibility, albeit it's important. But you fill in different forms for different companies, different tenders.
Oh, come on. Sorry, go on, Jeff.
So then Joe next, I think.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, I've just been listening to everything. I think, yeah, the one of the biggest frustrations that we've had over the last 2 years is that fragmentation of different councils with different objectives. Having that partnership, a hub at the top, feels like a really great way forward, but it's a partnership. So instead of giving East Midlands Chamber a set of outputs and Visit Peak District and Derbyshire a set of outputs and Marketing Derby, it almost feels like it should be one set of outputs delivered by a number of partners.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're also not chasing the same, we're not chasing outputs or chasing the funding because of the outputs, or that just makes us all organisations and partners that it almost feels like a business that goes to that level. It's a district economy business in Derbyshire, go towards the outlet. That's how it needs to happen, but we're all working towards the same set of number of outputs, whether that's business growth, exporting, a grant. And I think we've spent too many years as organisations competing with one another and competing for business membership as well. And we should look at it and model that just feels a little bit. I mean, I don't know how that would fit the chambers and private sector model, but there's a better way of doing it. There must be a better way of doing it.
It's called a portal, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to pick up on the other point, Mark, is it hit a wrong nerve, I'm afraid. But I think that the point in a nice way. Proportionate admin, I think, is what comes to mind, because I look at grants. I've got a business that's coming up for 10, and whether it's with that hat on, working with others, university, whatever, if it's a small grant, the paperwork seems to be the same.
It's proportionate,
Yeah. So I think it's finding thinking that if you're going to apply for 25 grand, it'll make a huge difference. So I don't have to then spend 4 weeks.
Well, that's why you get people who constantly get the same grant. And the amount of time, certainly with European money, where I've had a phone call say, we've got a deadline, right? Can you fill something in and you get another 10 grand, but which you've used? Well, that's not the way it should be. And I think it needs to be fluid. It needs to be the support that businesses need, the grants that businesses need, is different for every business. And what I might need now might be different to what I need when the budget comes in 11 weeks' time, because we don't know what that's going to bring. So it's very, very, you've got to be nimble as a business. Support you've got to give businesses, it's got to be done in a way where you make it easy for businesses. You're not making it easy for yourself. You get it right the first time. And just like a very simple point, if you fill form out once and that's your question asked, it's already there. It's a bit like, I'm a boxing coach, and you've got 5 or 6 elements of being a boxing coach. You've got your DBS, you've got your first aid. Once you've done the first aid, you've ticked it. Obviously, you've got to renew it. So if something policy-wise changes, then you might have to change the question on that question. But you've already ticked the box. So rather than taking 2 days, our businesses can't afford. I mean, the fact I've come here, which I love being part of this, is why I do it. But I'm working late tonight to make up for it. And that's what small businesses have to do. And I think that's what central government or Westminster, others don't understand what it's like in the real world. You know what I mean?
Kind of like a grant for a grant, isn't it? You need the grant to get the money to advertise then.
Yeah.
And-
And with regards to employment, with creating jobs, if a project works, I probably won't be creating a job within my business, but I'll be creating different jobs. And more to the point, I'll be probably proving that something works. And then the sort of thing that I do is, and then prove it to show other people how to do it.
I'd like to pick on Malcolm's point that the Westminster Bubble don't understand. Malcolm making very good points about small businesses. I also run a small business, and this year the confidence is on the floor. I've heard it described as a bloodbath out there. Sales are just not happening. Large companies like Air France, perhaps Rolls-Royce will say it's have the wool on the back to ride out a short-term recession, possibly, although I'm sure they feel it as well. But for a small business, a downturn in confidence can finish it in weeks or months. Although I've only been a member of EMCCA for a while, I can report that I've constantly heard out there talk about risk and being able to take more risk, which I'm very pleased to hear. I've constantly heard I use the term working at pace. So I think the emphasis is that we need to work quickly, simplify, streamline things, and take risks for the benefit of the area. And I echo those sentiments.
I think the consultation, I'm not saying don't do it, but what I am saying is probably going to tell us, after all the process, it's probably going to tell us what we already know. And I think there's a lot of answers from people within this room to where we need to be. Because you could speak to 20 businesses and you get different views from different people, but they'll probably tell you the same problems. And it's consistency. You need consistency of, and I also think that it needs to be one place, like I said previously. I think you're just going to keep it simple. The reason why people don't export, I've been export champion, I'm ambassador for Cabinet Office for 11 years, from the very, very start in this area. And the reason why people don't export SMEs is because they're told by banks that to export, you need a euro account, you need a dollar account. It's nonsense. I've exported to 90 countries. I've only exported in sterling. They're told that to actually get a set distributor, you've got to visit 3 distributors, come back, decide which one you're going to do. Nonsense. The reason I got my MBA was for the strategy to use the internet to export. What always happens with business, when something new happens, like exporting using your website, you get companies who are almost, I call them parasite businesses, who then basically say, boy, what you've got to do, you've got to get your website translated. It's nonsense. I had 9 websites at one point. I had 9 months leaving my websites. I turned 8 of them off. Because the staff were telling me that if someone in Nigeria was searching in English, they weren't looking at my Nigerian website. So the point I'm making is, that's why we don't export them. Because SMEs are too busy trying to survive, doing the basic stuff, sending someone down the road. We need to keep it simple. Simple message, simple process. And that will make it easy for businesses who ain't got much time.
I just think that circles us right back where we started first thing this morning, and we talk about the growth coming from small businesses. And I think the thing that we need to do, Mayor, is really probably encapsulate what we've discussed. I know you're not responsible for every single thing that happens in a day, but I think it's a case of it feels like it. But I think from what I hear today, the business voice is saying, is make it easy. Give us somewhere we can go. Give us a place where we can talk to somebody that probably talks our language as well. It's really difficult. Language terminology is really tricky when you're trying to do things like finding grants and support and all that kind of good stuff. And I think if we had that, it would give you more confidence. And I think that's what we need a little bit of, just a bit more confidence.
That was nearly
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just thinking about young people, all the young people that are doing business on social media, creating an entity, but doing good business and using the platforms built within social media like TikTok shops, etc. I think it's important we capture that in anything we're doing, because that's going to increase and also Malcolm's point about employing staff. With the increase of AI, we've now got virtual assistants, so they actually replace some of the roles that we traditionally would employ for. So keeping abreast of the technology that will replace the jobs that we won't be employing in the future.
That's another reason to have some sort of central public training. It's because, like I said before, the traditional leaving school, university, college, whatever way you decide to do it, that's not, in the future, that's not the end of the education, because AI is moving that quick. When I first started looking at AI, it was only 3 months ago, and I was on Claude 2, Claude, down 4. And whilst I'm working, I'm listening to podcasts from all these people, these experts, talking a lot of stuff that I was on my head. But when you hear something, you listen to it again, you try and get an understanding. And the way that technology is moving so quick, AI is actually, it's doubled its capacity already in 6 months. So if it continues at that speed, then we can't have something that's so rigid. Whatever we do has to be fluid. Like even the journey of starting a business, growing a business, having a problem with your recession, adapting, diversifying. And at each point, when as a business goes through there, you've got, well, where can we help? We need to change it. Like you just need one place.
I hadn't realised until yesterday that AI was a thing of the past. We're now on AG on it. I want to give the mayor the final word, but Scott, did you want to say anything?
There's been a lot of commentary about a single front door, hasn't there? Business support. And there's a really easy solution to this, I think. So this is what the consultants say, Jess, they have to pay you the royalty. So the growth hub is there. So it feels like growth hubs are going to endure from the central government concept. If you hyper invested in the growth hub, which massively improves its visibility, because there's an argument to say the scale of the investment from central government to growth hubs is more about maintenance than it is about taking them from the original concept that they were 10 years ago, probably. You know, that ought to be the single front door. But I think it just needs a greater budget to be able to reach some of those communities that are harder to reach. And there isn't even, and Dave and I were talking about this from a chamber investment perspective, you know, we are thinking of, you know, physical hubs, you know, across the EMCCA region, you know, is that, you know, almost business support hubs where, you know, if you think about the banking hub type model, but somewhere physically for businesses to go. I know that might sound like a slightly retrograde step in terms of Malcolm's narrative, but actually going back to there's only so many ways to do business support, and actually an advisor sitting across from a business owner, you can't really get better than that. And that's why I think when you think about things like export support, since it's all kind of sucked back into the centre, it is far less visible. You know, there used to be all those great international trade advisors on boots on the ground that we all know who they were, and you know, if a business said to us, I'm really thinking about Brazil as an all, I'm just the guy for you to talk to. Whereas now it feels like here's a website that you can go to feel like that's the kind of support. And I think that, you know, electronic, virtual, all of that is great if it complements rather than replaces. So,
I'm having in my head, Scott might talk about this a bit, of a vision of a place where the average SME doesn't have HR, doesn't have marketing, doesn't have all of these bits, doesn't need a lawyer in it, doesn't need an accountant, etc. But when they do, they do. So there's a physical door that you can walk through, and those people would be sitting there available to you. And it's a bit like a business version of a citizen advice bureau or a meal, but you know, at least you get signposted from there to wherever you go.
I think bang on the back of what Scott just said, the way things are going, a lot of new businesses have been working from home. I remember when I started a business in the back bedroom, it's great for someone to come and see you. So luckily I had a friend who had a business down the road, and I used his boardroom. I didn't lie to him and say I'm not working from a back bedroom, but having some sort of a physical place, it is good. Because even though people are going to work remotely, it doesn't matter. And also, it's very lovely having a business. It's having people to talk to, get ideas out there, and it's a place where we potentially could have meetings there, or could host events, make more of a community. It brings people from working from the back bedrooms or home, like to mingle again, share ideas.
I think that physical presence is the only way to unlock that get into businesses that don't genuinely get that support.
Yeah.
You've got to have boots on the ground.
So, Claire's going to pull us all together.
Okay, so I'm just kind of genuinely reflecting on the conversation and what you've been saying, because I think the value of this board is that you are feeding in real life experience and real engagement. And if we don't listen to that, then there's no point in this, is there? So the first is that I do think there is some value in a timeline that understands the other moving parts of what we're doing in terms of that longer strategy. So the local growth plan and the inclusive growth commission, because what we don't want is things that don't fit together in part of that bigger picture. So there's that timeline is still sort of sitting around the autumn, sort of September to October, November piece, isn't it? By the time you've got Inclusive Growth Commission launching mid-September, and then local growth plan probably October, November,
Mid-October, yeah.
Mid-October. So I think there is something about making sure that we don't miss that alignment. But I do think there is something specifically in the what do we know now and what can we do now? And that comes back to the principles. And I think, rather than asking a consultant to start from that base point, I think we can tell them through some certain broad principles of the things you're telling us now and things that we already know, and we can cross-reference quite quickly with the business community and with yourselves on their behalf, back to the consultant, so that then they are starting from a much higher position than maybe we would have originally thought. That would allow us then to make certain assumptions about the way in which we're going to proceed in terms of those growth. So some things I don't think there will be a debate about, so let's not go back and have a debate about them. The next is that I think in terms of the areas where we can think about using more broader picture. So I'm just kind of interested in reflecting, Malcolm, on what you're saying. One of the challenges of all these different pots of money, and you, as a small business, don't know where those pots of money are in the first place. And the second is you don't want to have to keep repeating the same process of telling people the information in order to access each one. So one thing that might be a speedier process is how do we create that first port conversation where we are taking the information from the businesses and helping to review what do we think you need, and AI might actually help us with that, but also some basic principles of when we review a business in that sort of gateway, what do we think we might be able to offer that you think would be helpful. So businesses will say, no, actually, I don't think I'm ready for that, or I don't think I need that grant. But we might tell them things that they didn't even know existed. And I think that might be a bigger driver in terms of the opportunities for growth, particularly with the SMEs. And the other area is we are looking at what the social entrepreneur opportunities are and how we grow those entrepreneurs right at the beginning. So whether it be looking at what we're doing around the connections to careers hubs and the support into particular marginalised communities where we don't see much entrepreneurship from, how do we grow a bit of that? Because that links in with the Inclusive Growth Commission, which is, we're not just leaving people behind in communities, we're actually going out and working with those. Some of that might come with other interactions of different activities, we have community development funds, things like that. So I think there are some board principles that we should just crack on and try and get agreed. So we are moving faster, a bit faster than others.
Excellent. Good. So, in terms of this board, I think I can say on behalf of all of us, feel free to engage with us in any way that necessary. We can make ourselves available or quickly on Teams or wherever if you need advice, support, suggestion on any particular area, because this is crucial as you've heard from the conversation today. This affects a large, medium, and small. The health board can. So, not in a meeting for meeting's sake, and we have done our agenda, apart from AOB. I'm not encouraging you to raise any, but if anybody has any other business, please feel free to say. Good. We'll go for today. Thanks very much for the opportunity.